Um, I, it's a very nice introduction. Thank you very much. I'm busy doing about 20 different things at the moment, so I'm trying to keep my head above water. But in my spare time, I'm an amateur actor. I'm performing in a performance this weekend at Rudderwood Little Theatre at a comedy variety show. And I'm also a mountain guide where I take people out mountaineering, hiking, abseiling, and then I run a climbing academy where we teach people different climbing skills. So instead of using a guide all the time, you can do it yourself. And yeah, so I've been out in the mountains for many years, and I have lots of friends here who've been on adventures with me. So the Tugela Falls idea, I first went to the edge of the Tugela Falls when I was 8 years old, poor boy, and I think I would never have believed that I would have sailed down it a few years later. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of history behind kloofing, which is a new fad or fashion that has hit the world, and it's becoming popular in South Africa. And then give you some idea of the gear used with the help of my colleague here, Lawrence. Fancy gear. Every passion has its own gear, has its own shoes, has its own magazines, has its own websites, has its own. So this is another whole set of gear that you can buy. And then we're going to have a look at some kloofs in South Africa briefly, and then hit into the Tugela Falls. So it would be the very first descent we're going to look at, and then we're going to look at our trip down, which was the second descent, and then we did a later one unassisted in full flow, and as was actually the fourth descent. So this is some idea. It's not going to the next slide. There we are. So this isn't my picture. I pinched it off the internet, but it's an idea of what the Tugela Falls is, if who has never been there. It's about a 2-3 hour hike from the car. This is not the normal sight. This is after a heavy downpour. It's thundering. It is magnificent. It pours off the Drakensberg escarpment for some debate of actually how big it is, but maybe between 700 to 900 meters, and has 3 main cascades, and then about 5 or 6 later, 3 main waterfalls and 5 or 6 other waterfalls later. So just to give you some background of, you have something called canyoning. This is a term used by Europeans, and it is typically a European canyoning is a situation where you have fixed anchors, always bolts, and normally quite an easy access to the top by a cable car or a bus that will take you to the top. And everything is kind of very cushy. It's there's obviously wild canyons, but most of it is very sort of safe and set up, and with reasonably easy approaches. But in Europe, the canyoning is huge. In some places like south of France, more people are canyoning than climbing. And it incorporates, often the European canyons, you incorporate quite a lot of flow or water. So you have issues with flow and water, and you have this dynamic of moving with water down. And that, for me, I find really exhilarating. And that power of the water is really exciting. Then in America, they have to be different. They have something called canyoneering, which is their form. And often in America, their canyoneering are dry canyons, such as like in Utah. And these are water courses that are eroded in soft sandstone, but they often have very little flow. And the key here is, instead of fixed anchors, you have natural anchors. What that means is you use what's there, like a tree or a rock, and they are very fussy about leaving anything there. So they have all these fancy techniques so you don't leave a sling behind or anything like that. They call it ghost canyoning, where you don't leave any trace of being there. And then in South Africa, we have kloofing. I just jumped one for some reason. I'm not sure why. We have kloofing in South Africa, where we have a combination of the natural canyoneering and the canyoning with bolts. And often we have huge, very remote areas of big cliffs and big approaches. Sometimes there's a kloof, under Tuis Kloof in the Western Cape. That is a 3-day trip where you take a day halfway up, a day up and halfway down the kloof, and a 3rd day down. This is what we call a slot canyon. This is a narrow slot that's been eroded down. This is about 5 meters wide and about 100 meters high. This is an exceptional slot canyon.
They didn't share it there.
Apologies.
Sorry, guys.
Okay, just. And the PowerPoint seems to be missed out a shot for some reason. Very good. Are we good? Okay, let's try that again. If nobody can watch on Zoom, at least you guys can see. And now my video doesn't want to work. So the trick with a slot canyon is it's very committed. Once you enter a slot canyon from the top going down, and once you've pulled the first abseil, you're very committed. You're not hearing anything. It's very committed. So the scary bit is that if at any point when you're going down, you can't find an anchor or the anchor isn't suitable, you're stuck. And there's absolutely not even a satellite phone will be able to get you. But it is very committing. And then the other thing about a slot canyon is if there is a thunderstorm and you have a flash flood coming down, you're in deep trouble. There's stories of people being stuck for 4 days on a ledge. Like they go down one of these and a thunderstorm comes down and they get onto some ledge and they sit there for 3 days waiting for the water to go down. That happened once in the Western Cape. So that's a slot canyon. This is a cascade. A cascade is not a slot. It's an open waterfall that pours down multiple waterfalls, and it's normally easy to escape, but cascades generally have a lot of flow. So there your danger is that having to deal with flow, having to deal with the risks related, similar to paddling, the risks of entrapment, the risks of getting it was just a difficult pull because we were going off a tree somewhere up there. We didn't have bolts, so we just used natural anchors, and the tree was quite far back. And then you have dry canyons, not many in South Africa, but like canyoneering in Utah. This is in the Richtersveld. And over there's a leopard that shared the canyon with us. And so dry canyons tend to be a different sort of thing. No flow. I prefer good flow wet canyons. I think Lawrence also, that's for me, that's really nice. But it differs with different people. So the gear. So what I'm going to do is this incredible rope. This is you can look at it afterwards. It's stronger than me. This is a Cordis German rope. Or is it Swiss? Cordis. Swiss, yeah. It costs about 60, 70 Rand a meter, as opposed to 30, 40 Rand a meter for a standard. And it's not uncommon to get a nick in the rope. So like these here, we did some tests of different ropes, and this is our nightmare. And so there's lots of techniques involved to prevent that happening, because you have ropes over edges and movement of over edges. So the rope saws on the edges. It's all sorts of problems relating to ropes. Then the gear. So I don't bring my wetsuit. There's a canyoning harness. You stripped all the stuff off it. It's got a bum pad. You look very sexy with this thing on. It's kind of industrial heavy, very durable, because canyoning really hammers stuff. So if you wear your climbing harness, like Fourth Canyon, you've got your leg loops are worn, and it's got big solid links here to hang bags and such like. It's very comfortable, so because you end up hanging a lot. That's a canyoning harness, canyoning shoes. These shoes were left in the bag since last canyon, a bit like moldy. The shoes also, like the harness, is extremely durable. So, and they got drainage, and they got protection of your foot, and very good rubber for you can walk down steep slabs and boulder hop with them. And canyoning shoes are, yeah, there's a neoprene socks. Okay, and the helmets. Yeah, this is a cool helmet. So the helmets, we tend to avoid these sort of very flimsy. I think, a lot of the helmet manufacturers have found that if they take the foam inner and they took it out and they thought, hey man, we can make another helmet out of this. So you get like climbing helmets that are really light but like quite flimsy, and we don't want that in a canyoning. So you want something. So this is actually a more rope access helmet, which is quite durable because you hammer it a bit as well. Okay, and then what else we got? Let's go to the new slide. Now is the cool stuff. Yeah, let's show them a piranha. Yeah, so we abseil mostly with a piranha, and if you look with a bit of imagination, which way is it now? Is it this way? Yeah. There's a piranha. And you'll see the piranha. There's its mouth. Ow! Careful! Don't bite. Don't put your finger there. And there's its kind of shape, and there's its fins. That's a piranha. It's a Petzl product, and this one was banned. Actually, they withdrew it because the rope was getting stuck out in the mouth. So there's actually, but we still got it. We're using it. You can see it's like really worn because they've done like hundreds of abseils of the thing. And we use it on extension on the harness. So we don't connect direct to the harness. We use it with extension to keep this technical. But and then we got this huge figure of 8, which is, that's a double figure of 8.
Oh, you want to do that?
Yeah, the double figure of 8 is cool too. How's that? Cool device. Oh yeah, there's the double figure of 8. Okay, there's a huge figure of 8. So the huge figure of 8 can be used for long abseil, 100 meters, and it doesn't get so hot, yet it's smooth, very smooth abseiling. Whereas if you use, say for example, a Petzl stop, or the old-fashioned Petzl stop, or something similar like an ID or a Luri. Don't worry if you lost. It's like hundreds of these things. These type of locking devices tend to jam if the rope's wet, whereas the big figure of 8 doesn't. So what we found is on big abseils, 100-meter abseils, and the rope's wet, a locking type device like a Petzl stop, like stops and goes and stops and goes, and there's kind of like the point at which it breaks and releases kind of isn't so smooth transition. So it's either stop or go, and you tend to bounce. And this was the problem that we had on Tugela, which we'll get to later. And then we have stuff to go back up the rope. So if we have to, that's a chest descender, and that's a Juma. So this clips on the rope. Well, it's called a rope ascender, but it's like clips on the rope, and it like slides and only goes one way, and you can go up the rope. And other bits and pieces, like there's a miniature throw rope. So for water rescue, we have a tiny throw because we're never really more than 10 meters away from the rescue point. We have a tiny little throw rope. We have a knife to cut our biltong, and a whistle. Okay. This is for communicating because you got thundering water and you can't hear each other. So you have a signal system. There's a recognized system. 2 blasts means 1, 3 blasts means something else. And then this is a release lanyard for anchors. So there's all sorts of things. I think a micro traction for 3-to-1 pulleys to pull guys out of shit and all sorts of things. So this is a cool thing. Check here. There's a beaner with a pulley built in for a 3-to-1 Z haul to pull a person who's stuck. These are all guiding things. You'll learn all this fancy stuff if you join one of my courses. So that's the correct Tugela, with a U in front. So when we first went down, we did it in just before May 1st, one weekend, because we'd wanted it dry, because we didn't want to do it in flow for the first time, because we've got to deal with finding the anchors and getting down and have to deal with water flow. So we kind of did it, and this is typically where the waterfall falls. It falls down here. It has initially a small, like a 50-60 meter drop, then one second waterfall is a huge, then it flows rapids a bit, then there's a third waterfall. And the third waterfall was named by the opening party called the Porno Abseil, because it's a free hanging 80 meter abseil. So from a man's perspective, they called it the Porno Abseil. And my mouse is gone. There it is. And then the one before we named the foreplay abseil. So you got the foreplay and the Porno Abseil. And then after it's not over, that's Abseil 8. There's a total of 21 abseils. There's some marketing. Let me go back. Highest mountain, highest waterfall in the world. There's a drone. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of interesting history. Has anybody heard of Tom Pinky? No. This is a story of a person called Tom Pinky and Margarine Fran. I think surname isn't quite that. Let me move this to see that. I can't do that. And they met at Royal Natal National Park at the bottom. This account is taken from Barrier Spears. It's a book on the Drakensberg, and there's other books also talking about it. And they were met at Royal Natal National Park in 1947, and they hiked to the top to what it was, still is, the Mountain Club hut, but it's not really functional as a hut at the moment. But back then it was fully equipped hut at the top of the Tugela Falls. There was kind of a bit of a romance forming between this. There's 100 stories about this. Marjorie denies it, but then other people confirmed it. So anyway, and then they sat on the edge of this huge amphitheater cliff as kind of like a romantic couple would. And he stood up, and for no reason, he just fell back. And he fell about 280 meters. It's a bit of a dampener for a date. She was in total shock, and then they had like a big rescue attempt. So there's a very famous individual called George Thompson. He did the first ascent of the column solo. He climbed the Outer Pinnacle, first ascent of that, first ascent of Punjuan, first ascent in. This chap was a bricklayer when he was part of the building team for Cathedral Peak Hotel. He was from New Zealand originally and an absolute gifted climber. And they called on George and a party to try and rescue or come get to Tom Pinky's body. And they came across, and I'll show you now, from a grass ledge, and first attempt, but it was raining and they backed off, and they came again he came with a stronger team, and he got to the body, but he realized at that time, 1947, they couldn't do anything about it. So they covered it and made it look respectable, and then went back down. So if you happen to Abseil, want to go down to get a falls there, about 150 meters from the falls, there's a real live skeleton there somewhere.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's how the original thing depicted where he went. So the falls is here, and if you walk towards the north, there's a big cutback, and he went down that, and he made his way across somewhere below the second and then up to Pinky's body. But having a look at it very carefully, I think this is more accurate. So Tom Pinky fell roughly there. He came down the cutback. He made his way along that grass ledge and down to the base and across underneath the second cascade. Then I could see there's a way up on the right. It's not easy. It's steep, blank walls, no gear. I tell you, this Thompson guy in 1947, he was way ahead of his time. He's an absolute legend. He got to the body, he descended. In those days, they would climb down. So they would lower the others and the leader would climb down. And then he made his way. I could see a way through. And it's something interesting one day to try climb up or come kind of do this route as an exercise, you know, follow Thompson's route on the Tugela Falls. Theoretically, Thompson and party were the first to go down Tugela Falls in 1947. Not that they intended to go down and not that they did the initial section. But then later, there was a group of people from a Slovak expedition. So this gentleman, I've corresponded a little bit with him, Miroslav. He's basically descended every main waterfall in the world. Angel Falls, these big things in Norway, big things in Switzerland. And his bucket list was to do every waterfall. So one of them, of course, was the Tugela Falls. Having a suspicion that he wouldn't be allowed to do it, he just arrived and did it. And as we have the KZN or KZN Wildlife have a reputation of being quite aggressive in this respect. I don't know if you ever heard of the story with a Leofarata, I think only about, yeah. So anyway, so they just bolted down with bolts, and the KZN Wildlife were fuming, and these guys hid for years. Nobody could find them. And now they've come out of the woodwork a little bit. But anyway, they've now got a little thing on their website, and this was the first descent done by this team. It was a very big team of people, I guess over 10 people. They had full support teams, they had bivy gear, and they did it in 2 or 3 days. So they slept on the way down. And they placed probably about 70 bolts. And every anchor has got fixed bolts, and some of them have got lots of bolts. And actually, it's a bit over-bolted. That's what we used. Stainless bolts, good bolts, nothing wrong with it. Except they put the bolts a half meter apart and put this terrible tat. Why didn't they put 2 bolts there so that you don't have to replace the tat every time? That's a technical thing. And it is anyway, don't worry about that. Okay. So they had a drone, and so they started about 30 meters to river right. It means facing downstream of the actual edge of the waterfall. And they did an initial 10-meter abseil, I'm not sure why. And then they did the next one, which was 190 meter, and then 110-meter abseil. And then they went down. So that's them lower down on one of their, that's the Porno abseil. So named by the person who opened it. And that's a chap somewhere on the face there with a blue shirt, with a big waterfall next to him. So the dimensions of this thing is enormous. You could see like the size of the whole cliff face, and that is vast, and the people are so small. So we came along to do the second descent, and that's a chap named Roger, that's Samuel, myself, and Chris from Germany. And we trained for it, and we had all the right gear, as Lawrence showed us. And then we were a bit crazy, and this is just before we were leaving. So this is right back the day before. We hiked up with a full support team. That's Brittany, Chris's wife. That's Tony. Some of you might know him. That's Nadine. She's here somewhere. There she is. That's Lawrence. He's here. And then that's Samuel's wife. So we had like a support team, and we hiked up, and they carried all our sleeping stuff down, drove around to Royal National Park, and hiked up and met us at Tunnel Cave. So, and the idea that we should meet kind of at Tunnel Cave, and we were hoping to be at Tunnel Cave before them, and they were hoping to be at Tunnel Cave before us, but we met almost exactly at the same time, just after dark. So we were getting psyched, we're getting in the zone, we're meditating. This is all stuff we were doing the day before to get ready for this major. And that night we were shitting ourselves because you don't sleep properly before these things. And it was really cold. The next morning at dawn, Nadine has got 20 layers on. I think she put her feet in the sleeping bag.
No, my backpack was on.
You put your feet in your backpack. Anyway, and so at 5 in the morning we started. Just to give some idea of the dimensions. That's the edge of the Tugela Falls. These are people that we, even that early in the morning, we accumulated a bit of a crowd watching us. And there we started. That's me and Chris on the first dance. Pinky fell somewhere here. Sorry. I sincere apologies, Pinky. That's a picture looking down. Never look down, but you have to figure out what you're doing. We use these. Oh, yeah, we didn't show the bag. No, we've got to show the bag. So we have these canyoning bags that we manage the ropes in. There's one, and they got drainage holes. And this one's a bit hammered, but it's been in places. Anyway, and then you feed rope in after each abseil, so you don't coil it every time. Okay, there we are. There's a canyoning bag. Yeah. There's Chris on the third abseil. So we battled to find these anchors. These anchors were like hidden in the grass somewhere, and I went down first, and I was like, yes, I'm crapping myself because I'm on 100 meters down, and even a static rope is like about 2-3% stretch. So you bouncing 3 meters like around, and I'm moving to the left and bounce, and I move to the right, bounce, and where are these anchors? And eventually we found them, and then we set, and then we carried on. There is further down, getting lower. I think that's Roger. So there's an idea. If you look at the red circle, that's Roger. Good old Roger. That's after abseil 6. And this is the massive second waterfall. It comes off that edge and drops about 220 meters down there. So this is us recapping on a ledge, looking a bit bedraggled, except with Roger. Now, this is something that we came across that was extremely risky. So what also happens, of course, this isn't done very often, and the Drakensberg is well known for loose rock. Of course, you find loose rock on all general, less loose rock on the big faces, more in the cracks. But so this was abseil, the 4-play abseil 8, and this big flake here, this whole system of flakes, which was about the size of a 3/4 bed, was totally loose. And I had to abseil down and step over the thing. And then my rope rested on it as I carried on. It was terrifying. And the one thought that I had is there were also some loose stuff higher up. But one thought is, well, maybe I could swing here and dodge it. But then I thought if I come back, because the stance is here where the photograph's taken, the rope might come back this way to the right and hook under the bloody thing and tip it onto me. Then the same plan if I try to go around there, but there was like loose blocks here, and I thought there's only one way. Yeah, I have to go straight over it and just like tiptoed over them. And so yeah, so that was something that we had a lot of loose rock, and that is deadly because it can cut your rope, it can put a dent in your head and put a damper on the whole day activities. Then we came down and we got some hanging stances. So Samuel's there on a hanging stance. So what that means is blank cliff. You come down and you clip into a bolt on the, and you hang in your harness. And then you do all your rope work, pull your previous rope, and you get into the new rope, feed it, and then you abseil again. everything just hanging on a stance. And then this was us setting Abseil number 21. See, it's getting dark then. So it was about 7 o'clock. We've been going 14 hours. And then about 2 hours later, we arrived at Tunnel K. Well, no, about 7 o'clock. So this was, yeah, about an hour later. So this is some videos. This is the Porno Abseil. Taken not greatly zoomed in. Is the sound working? That's the free hanging 80 meter. So notice how little water there is. Later when we did it, this was thundering. So it's a good kind of idea to compare it. But of course, we were very cautious. We first did it when it was easier. Yes, I know. It's very difficult to predict this. Because it was kind of late April. It's often there is flow still, but it wasn't. And then he made a video, YouTube, it's on YouTube with his GoPro. So this is Chris's video of the second descent, our first descent. Action music. Pull the rope like that, rocks come too. So now you'll see the bastards found this old shoe and put it in my backpack. There! Bloody hell! I found it in the cave at the bottom. So that was the second descent, and then we went again, stuck us for punishment. So this year, April, we decided, we had planned, because some other people, Lawrence was on the support team. So the idea is you come on the support team, and then next time you come with, you see, this was the deal. So we did the first unassisted descent in Easter this year. What we mean by that is we left at the car park with everything, and we arrived back at the car at the bottom with everything. We didn't have a support team, unassisted. Oh yeah, she drove around. Okay, so it was just partially assisted. So in that April, there was record rainfall in the Mini, I don't know if you remember, rivers, bridges and roads were washed away in KZN this April. And we were still going to go down the Tugela Falls. And from about 10 kilometers away, you can see the falls. This is incredible. It was thundering. And there were people saying, don't go. And then just before Easter, there was heavy snowfalls predicted and heavy rain. In fact, this changed to 50 millimeters rain on the Sunday. On the Easter weekend, we had a slight weather window on the Friday, so we took it.
I think it was the only day we could go.
Totally. And the second half of the day, it pelted with rain. And in fact, that evening, Nadine's tent was washed away.
Rest of the weekend it rained all weekend.
But we grabbed that few hours on Friday and we did it. So we got up at 3 a.m. at the car park, and this is taken with a phone, and there's a Southern Cross. Lovely. I think Nadine took this photo. And then we got to the edge of the falls, and 2 hours later, we left at 4, got up at 3, left at 4. 2 hours, we're at the edge of the falls at sunrise. And there we go. The water was beautiful. It was thundering. We loved it. It's yours truly. Then we continued down. This was after the 4th abseil, Lawrence. And we're pulling ropes. So every abseil, you've got to pull the ropes, repack. This was a big abseil. It's difficult to pull. There's the second cascade, 220 meter cascade or waterfall. Then this is lower down. This is abseils after abseil 6 or 7. This is Ruan, who was with us. Him and his wife, or his fiance, Renske. This was now just before foreplay and porno, the crux. We had a bit of food and we rested a bit, and then we pushed onto the crux. Little did we know that would take us 2.5 hours, which ended up finishing in the dark. This is the porno abseil in flow. So there's a stance there. So you do the foreplay, which is 90 meter, which we did it in 2 abseils, 245s, 2 year. You have a hanging stance, that same one on the video. And then you do as 80 or 70, you could swing onto a ledge to make it a 70, free hanging down to here. You've seen those other videos of it. This is the crux of it, because you've got to interchange on a hanging stance and in flow. So while you're on that hanging stance, the water is pounding you from a 90 meter waterfall above you. And this was the story that happened. So essentially, Lawrence went first, wet ropes. That's why I think the big frigate is better. And the wet ropes bite too much, and he was bouncing, and the rope got onto an edge, and it was sawing on this edge. And this gentleman is alive today, like some miracle, because the rope 3/4 cut through. And then Renske went next, and she abseiled down, and she stopped about 2 meters before this damaged rope. She says, the rope's damaged, but you can't hear each other. It's you're in this pounding waterfall. He's sitting on that hanging stance. And then I saw that Rowan had a problem there. He was actually busy hauling her back up. So I abseiled down to help him. We pulled Renske back by Z-hauled her back. And then we have four 300-meter ropes, 270-meter. We have about 500 meters rope. We have spare ropes. You don't want to only go with one rope. And so we set the other rope onto her, and then we lowered her off because she was very shaken. And then we abseiled like as gently as we could on that whole thing. Took 2.5 hours to sort out. And there's Ron, Lawrence filmed this, coming down at the end. So this water is interesting in that the wind, it moves. So it would pound over there, and then you see it coming. And you like as if you're in the First World War in a trench, and you come in and it's hitting you. Oh my word! And then you wait, and then the kind of drifts over there again, and you carry on what you're doing. I've got these guys there on the Orange River to give us some. I hope this works.
How's it? Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Orange River here. We're quickly going to tell you a little bit about our Tugela Falls abseiling experience with Neil Margetts. It was an absolutely dream come true. When he first told us about it, I was 100% in from the get-go. Renske was slightly apprehensive at first. But yeah, we ended up going on the trip. I think we departed from Sentinel Car Park at 4 in the morning. We hiked up, took us about 2 hours to get to the start of the falls. We rigged up, and yeah, this is what type of abseiling through the waterfalls? Kloofing. It is a kloofing, canyoning. So the idea was to stay in the rivers. I think the first 4 or 5 sections we kind of stayed to the side of the river. We weren't wet so much, but we had our wetsuits on ready for action. And hereby abseil number 8, 7, 8, 9, porno abseil. That's where things started getting real. And me
Really
being
real.
yeah, me having the personality I decided I want to man the stance, which is basically abseil down 80 meters, and we anchored off on some anchors in the water. And it's an 80-meter waterfall. So at the bottom of the 80-meter waterfall, I manned that stance, and the first person to come past was Lawrence. Right, he came past me and continued abseiling down.
With the wetness at this point, the rope got.
Okay, we kind of split this up. Okay.
With the wetness at this point, the rope got quite bouncy. So as he was free hanging, once you got over the edge of Porno, you basically just 70 meters free hanging in the air. And he got quite bouncy with the weight and the wetness and the distance of the rope.
Yeah, my initial expectation was to sit there for about 15-20 minutes for everyone to come past me, maybe half an hour max. Yeah, after Lawrence went, Renske came down. As she went over the edge of the abseil, about 10 meters in, she found that the rope was cut just below her. And
Nothing serious, just another day in paradise.
That's when the panic kicked in. I mean, we are abseil supervisors. We've done this all the time. We know our rescue scenarios. We know how to get out of things. We've got the skill set. But when you've got an 80-meter waterfall falling on you, it's freezing cold. You've got an 80-meter drop. You're in the middle of it all. It's not a commercial situation. Panic can kick in a bit.
I freaked out. I freaked out.
So Renske couldn't end up pulling herself back up. So luckily we had another rope, and it's a dynamia. It's a rope that's made for canyoning. It's actually got a 4.5 ton brake strength, and it's got no stretch in it. Beautiful rope. And I swung that down to her, and she clipped onto that, and I put her onto a belay device by me, and I kept on hoisting her up until she got back to me. Once she was by me, she was still quite shaken, and you literally.
Okay, move on.
With the wetness at this point, the rope got quite bouncy. So as he was free hanging, once you got over.
It was still quite.
Nervous at first. I mean, a kilometer of abseiling, you're just hanging off of a cliff face on a bolt in the rock. I was quite scared and nervous about it, but then again, just knowing where Neil comes from and all the extreme things himself have done definitely eased the nerves. Once I got over that first edge, all the fear was gone. It was just pure amazement of being able to do this, where you're on this rock face and you look to your right and there's Tugela, and you look down and there's nothing. It's just air. It's quite a bucket list for me that I got to tick off. Yeah, incredible. Do it anytime again, just not when it's wet.
Yeah, we certainly learned a lot. Your canyoning experience is totally different to your average abseil. If you abseil down the side of the mountain, stance for stance for stance, you dry. The equipment doesn't get wet. So the moment the equipment gets wet, now your pestle reversos aren't working, your giants aren't working, any of your automatic stopping devices don't work anymore. The basic of a figure of 8 is your ultimate device in the wet environment. Being in the wet environment, you also don't use things like your it's a thin rope.
Prusik?
Your prusik.
Don't use prusik.
It's just there's a whole bunch of other things to consider out there, and yeah, it's an absolute honor and privilege to have learned from Neil and work with Lawrence as well. It was very cool.
Awesome stuff. Stay tuned for more. Ciao.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
So this further down. So we got through, and then we were racing against time and racing against the weather, because that 50 millimeters of rain was coming in faster than we anticipated. Black clouds moving in, marching in. Now we're moving. And I think we pulled the last ab just because we're on this thing in the rain. It's because you can, least further down, you've got a wider river valley. You can get the hell out of the way if there's a flash flood coming down. But if you're in there, you're in trouble. And so we now there's about 7 hours in between these two slides, or maybe 12 hours. Because this is the next morning. Of course, I didn't have my phone out in the pouring rain, so we didn't take any photos. But we went down all the way from the end of the abseil all the way down and up, but we had to go very slowly because it pouring as rain, total dark with headlamps, navigating our way. And very slippery and strong currents to deal with, like these water flows under boulders and forms in like these siphons and vortexes and all sorts of things. You've got to just be very careful. Anyway, we got back to the cave, and this is the next morning. It kind of misparted a little bit, and we could see the Tugela Falls from the tunnel cave. I think there's a video there on that side, which is very zoomed up, and of course it's pouring in the rain. Which was quite nice to see the waterfall from the cave. And then we hiked out, and of course our ropes were wet, everything was wet. So the heavy bags were super heavy. Yeah, well, I don't know. It's probably we were carrying about 30 kilos.
Your bag is about 30 kilos.
So we met these two, this little two couples walking up. Remember that? And I said, like they were in the rain and they looked very miserable. And I said, well, look, the river's very full, it's dangerous. And then they turned around and they're walking a bit down with us, and kan ek jou sak dra? Yeah, sure. And I handed it to him. Plak skorrel. And he handed it back to me. Yeah. And the mandatory Tower pizza meal afterwards, after we.
You guys took extremely long to get back, so that some of our other friends that's been watching this whole trip.
I have a Garmin InReach, and it was like the track, and everybody's like watching this bloody track. So I left my bag. And I ran up to fetch some gear that we dumped. And so they were like on the WhatsApp group going around. They haven't moved. That's another thing. So we came down. Oh, the stuff's heavy. So we hid it under like a rock, and we pushed for the cave. And think next morning we can run up and find this. And then, and we couldn't bloody find this. And we walked all the way up to the base of the. And meanwhile, I left my other bag at the cave because you don't want to now carry that bag up to look for the other bag. but my spot was the in-reach was in the top of the bag, standing still, and this freaked everybody out.
I think you guys used up your 9 lives.
You think so? So, in conclusion, I just want to discuss this, which is I'm a scientist. I run a laboratory supply company, and my way of thinking is you have a test, you have a proposal of some sort, you test it and you check to confirm if there's any way that it cannot be wrong, and then you only then accept it as a fact. And even certain things in science, like the theory of evolution, which is, like, my opinion, pretty conclusively checked, but some people disagree, they still don't totally conclusively claim it. And so that's the scientific way of doing it. But there's people totally, absolutely claiming this is the highest waterfall in the world, and I disagree. And every time I see some report, the height seems to grow. I don't know. So this is a topo. This is a word for like a description of, you get topos for climbs, topos for rivers, topos for canyons. And so essentially this is the Tugela. You got a 10 meter. I don't know why they did that. The second one, we left it out. And then you have an 80 meter to the lip, to that difficult to find, which is at roughly about 30 degrees. Then a straight 32, then a 70. The original guys did this in one. We added that anchor 4. Then you got like a scrambly one, and then you got a 50 to the base of the second cascade. And then you have a 45 link in, and then you got the 4-play free hang vertical 90. Then you got the porno 70 or 80 if you're to there. Then you have a short 20. And then it gets a bit complicated. I don't know why I did this. But anyway, it goes more, lots more. So if you add all those up, there's 3 different ways that I worked out the height of the waterfall. The one is with the topographic map. And the professional setup was in the way. I'm not too sure why that is. Can you get rid of this? Yes. Okay. So if you take the topographic map and the contours, you can kind of see after Abseil 18, it clearly flattens out, which is what we found. It's boulder hopping, it's walking. In fact, if you could do some scrambling at the bottom, you can get to the base of Abseil 18 if you want to. You can walk there with a bit of scrambling. And that is at 2170, according to the map contour. So we worked out that 790 meters. Then if we add up all the heights of all our rope lengths and worked it from there, now I have to move this. There we go. I'll move it there. That kind of comes down to 808 meters. Then the best one is we took a GPS averaging waypoint at the top and a GPS average waypoint at the bottom. And there's the actual GPS points at the start and end. And that's 772. So the height at the top of the tunnel is like 4 kilometers downstream is that height, which would make it 972. So we reckon that the original surveyors or people who predicted that height of the waterfall took it from the tunnel cave at the bottom, which is not, it's not waterfall. It is, you got a boulder hop for 4 kilometers to the base of the waterfall. It's nowhere near the bottom of the waterfall. I think a lot of it is marketing. So that's my opinion on the height of the Tugela Falls. It's not the highest. There's something called, there's one. This is what they call the World Waterfall Database. It's a website where they're putting this as the highest. And we looked through all their small print. How do you work that out? And they say when it stops dropping and becomes flat water, like a lake or something, that's the end of the waterfall. But it doesn't make sense. There would be in the Himalayas 3,000 meter at from the base camp of what's the name? Peak. Names jumped out of my mind. You have a cascades, which solidly drops in cascades. Island Peak, yes. Solid cascades dropping 3,000 meter drop. If you take that into account of the way you measure the waterfall, Tugela Falls wouldn't even be in the top 100. You wouldn't even get out of the Himalayas before you start. Because the problem problem with the Tugela Falls is it only starts at 2.7. It starts very low. There's the waterfall down the Red Wall in Mnwini, not Mnwini, in Intercity. The Red Wall waterfall starts at 3.1, and there to the Intercity camps 1,500 meters. It's double the height of this. It just doesn't make sense why they say that's the highest. That's my opinion. Other people differ. I asked the head ranger of KZN Wildlife. I'm finished. That's my last slide. and he said, no, what? Yeah, but don't tell anybody because it's part of our marketing.
Here you are.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think I just made it. And any questions in the dog? I don't think I'm on still. Maybe. No, there we go. Right, I'm back.
So when you're adding on a single line?
Yes.
And then how do you get it down?
Questions, and let's just try and get it some Tuesday again.
Sure.
Climbing question.
Okay, yeah. So there's the classic abseil and climbing ab double rope, and you pull one line. The problem with that in a flow situation in the water is that it goes slow. If ropes get wet, the abseil device has a lot more friction. You don't even use a prissy because you will be fighting the prissy to get down. So we add single line because it goes quicker and you can have more control in flow. And then what we do is we have a block anchor. So we put a figure of 8 or something and we link it against a malyon or something. And then the other line's a pull line that we keep totally separate. Because another thing with double ropes is they can twist over each other and it makes it more difficult to pull.
So when Roger and Samuel on their first trip, that first 10 meters, they were two guys. And the ropes kept on blowing.
They blow around each other, yeah. Or the water moves the rope around each other.
So
and the one rope go underneath each other and it makes it difficult to pull. So we have the pull line totally separate in a bag, these bags. This harness has a loop here that is strengthened. And this thing stays here and the pull rope comes out here. It's totally separate. Yeah, am I back? Okay, we had one question everybody missed. That was, why do you not abseil double rope? Why you abseil single rope? And the gist of it is that it's easier to pull, to keep the pull rope separate. It causes less trouble in flow or in situations like that. Okay.
Guys, any questions? No questions.
Everybody's very scared.
It's just a question from Neil Cowley. He says, what about Angel Falls in Venezuela? Google gives it as 979 meters. So
yes.
It's obviously referring to your last slide.
Correct. So I've never been there. I can't say as firsthand. Because the question is, Angel Falls, what about Angel Falls in Venezuela? I've never been there, but this chap who did the Tugela, the Slovak, has done it. And there's a huge debate there too. Where does it end? I think each place wants to make their waterfall the highest.
No, fair enough.
That one has the biggest. That one has the biggest free for the single drop. The biggest single drop. The Angel Falls definitely has the biggest single drop, which is like 600-700 meters.
And so you say the first team spent 2 nights.
Yes.
Sleeping at there.
Yes.
Those camps and would you plan it?
Okay, so the question here is the first team that they went down and spent 2 nights to go down. They bivouacked. So what they did is they went, there's certain places you can come out of the river where it's flatter and you could kind of find a flattish area in the bushes between the rocks. It's obviously not very comfortable. And they slept there. And they said they had rain on their way down in there, if you read their account. So they also had their share of issues.
All right, guys. Any other question? Lewis, anything from your side? Final questions?
No, there's nothing else. Thank you very much. It was excellent.
Great. Thank you.
And just for record's sake, for our formal dinner happening at the end of the month, as far as I'm concerned, the falls are the highest falls in the world. Because we want bragging rights. So